Obviously, good evening. Happy Wednesday. Hope everyone's staying warm. I know mostly everyone, I think everyone on this call knows my name, but I'll say it for the intro, for the love of it. My name is Ashara Baker. I'm the Community Engagement Manager with the New York Charter Schools Association. Tonight's agenda for February, we won't really go over housekeeping items as much as just related announcements. We have a very special guest this evening. We are going to hear from all about supports from at home learning, and then we'll have some time for some open discussion and our action step for the month. So, a few announcements. We don't have them on the call, which I'm very sad about, but I want to do a shout out to our two dadvocates. That's like the new hashtag that's going around. Props to Edwin who did that. Edwin Cespedes and Jason Montanez were recently on Raymond Incrum's The EduPurist podcast. So they are representing the council, holding it down for the charter dads. It was an awesome conversation, and it's one of the most recent videos that we have on the Facebook page. So definitely check it out. Also want to shout out the Fearless Mamas who aren't on the call as well, Maria Cruz and Sabrina Skelton. They actually testified at the most recent joint legislative public hearing on education. And this is, I did not know, but this is the first time ever that we've had charter parents testify in that space. So we're making history, we're lifting voices. It's been a phenomenal month, in my opinion. And then we also have a new rescheduled Twitter training date. So we are trying to get out on Twitter. I don't use Twitter. Gretchen doesn't use Twitter. But for folks who want to take advantage of it, we are going to be hosting a charter specific, charter parent specific Twitter training. Gretchen, you're more than welcome to jump on.
I was just about to say, maybe I need to get on that training.
I'll send it to you. Please.
Sounds like a plan.
I need support for my questions, my basic questions. And Daniela will put that in the chat, the date. We don't have Sabrina tonight, so I'm just gonna kick it off. Our special guest. Oh, actually, Daniela has an announcement as well.
Just one announcement for New York City parents. The primary for our mayor is going to be only in June, but if you're not registered until I think in the next 10 days, you cannot vote in the primary. And we have mayoral control for our schools. So it's really, really important to register so you can vote in the primary. And I'll also put the link in the chat.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
So we'll kick it off. I just want to say this before we even start. This recording is going to be shared out, and I'm hoping that you folks who are on this call will share it out with your charter school communities and your parents who weren't able to attend tonight, because it's very valuable resources. I personally lean on this woman for a lot of things around navigating a 4-year-old during COVID, because she's turned into a whole topic and not my child anymore. But I want to introduce you to an amazing mama. She's an educator for both adults and kids, Gretchen Osodipe.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Osodipe.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
I got
awesome.
it.
You got it. You totally got it. Before we got on the call, I was telling everybody that my maiden name, before I got married, my husband's Nigerian, he's Yoruba. And before I got married, my maiden name was Lee. And so like I went from a very easy name to just like see and pronounce to something that's a little bit more challenging. But I am so excited to be here with you guys tonight. We're a very small group, which means that we can just talk and not necessarily like stand on ceremony. If y'all could, I know y'all kind of know each other, but since I'm kind of new to the group, if y'all could tell me like the age of your learners. I know you guys are parents, the age of your learners, and if you are working at a school, you can talk about like the capacity that you work at a school too. So 4 and 8 years old, okay? Six, 8, and 10, 15, 3, 6, and 9, okay? So a lot of elementary school and pre-K. Okay, elementary school. All right. 10 going on 20. Yeah, that's everybody's baby. 100%. Okay. So that'll be good. I put together some slides just because if I wasn't sure if people were going to be on their phones or if they were going to be on computers. And so I figured if you were on your computer, this would be nice for you to have something like to anchor on and look at. But the slides are just there for just a shared kind of thing to look at. We are not necessarily held to the slides. And so if you have questions or there was a reason why you got on this call tonight and you were saying like, I have some questions, I need some answers, then by all means, jump off mute, chat it, put it in the chat, whatever you need to do so that your needs can be met by this time. So I'll just kick off. Ashara gave the best introduction. Like, my name is Gretchen. I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. Naomi is the oldest. She's in the middle. She was about to be 7 in a couple of days. Josh is the baby boy, and he's about to be 3 in March. And Lydia is about to be 5 in March. And so we're over here with all those children. Prior to the work that I'm doing now, I have worked in education for over 15 years and a whole bunch of different capacities. But the biggest kind of takeaway is that like I love teaching and learning. And I love like the high level stuff and the big ideas around teaching and learning. And I love the nitty gritty. I have a 3rd grader, what do I do at home kind of thing. And so in this time together, we can go between like the big picture, conversations, as well as like the nitty gritty, like what are we going to do tomorrow? And then the 3rd thing is that I'm a founder of an organization called Co-Teach. And what Co-Teach does, our mission is to connect parents and educators so that parents get the individualized and personalized support that they need and they deserve. And so we do that work in 3 different ways. We work with families one-on-one, and we work with families kind of in spaces like this, where we're all kind of coming together and we're going to have a big presentation and chat. We work with parents through their employers. And so it's like, you've got a whole bunch of working families who are working from home right now and their kids are right behind them. How, as an employer, do I support my parents? And then we also work with schools because we know that we all need to have our capacity built if we're going to work together well. And so we'll do some PD for teachers, and then we'll also have parent nights, kind of similar to what we're having tonight, where we kind of bridge that gap between what teachers are learning and what parents are learning. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we do. And that's who I am. And this is the topic for the night, learning loss. So what are y'all thinking about learning loss right now? And then we'll kind of jump into like defining it and getting on the same page about it. What are y'all thinking about learning loss right now? What comes to mind? You freaked out about it? Is it keeping you up at night kind of thing?
How to avoid and to not just waste the school year, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think like when we closed last year in March, I was like, okay, it's a few months, like you don't need to worry about it. But then now it becomes a whole school year. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Well, I'll jump in. I'm just fearful. We haven't been in an actual classroom. We've been in a lot of relaxed preschool, daycare settings. So I'm afraid that she's not going to be prepared to get into kindergarten the proper way.
I'm afraid I'm the worst math teacher in the world. Common Core sucks. And I Google every damn thing that applies to math. And it can be very hard, especially when you're working full time, from home. It can be very difficult, but I feel for them in terms of their interaction with their friends. So that's the big thing. And, but I've started to do things to help myself, which helps them ultimately with homeschooling.
That's awesome.
I'm worried.
We just want to make sure that kids are progressing at their grade level each year. So with the now being in the classroom, we're worrying about whether our third graders are going to be ready for fourth grade, and so on and so on up the line. So I think that's the main concern.
Yeah.
I'm worried about this happened when my daughter was like a freshman in high school. So happened like before she, finished her freshman year. So now she's moving into her she's in her sophomore year, and it's just, like her teacher said, well, we hope that as they get older, like a lot of them don't turn on their screens, and they're kind of like pull back, and a lot of the teachers have to like really try to push them to do things that are, social. And they're like, the teachers are like, my goodness, I don't even know what you guys look like, and if I see you walking down the hall, I wouldn't even know you, but I need to see you so I can like know who you are, and because you'll need me to write a recommendation for you soon. And it's just hard for them to really get to know each other, and their teachers too, and their counselors, which are going to help them get into college. And it's just like so much like social emotional stuff, and also becoming lazy, like just bodies becoming, even for me as an adult, like if we go walking a lot, it's like, oh my, I'm tired, my legs hurt, so just like the body, your body, just not using your body as much.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think one of the things that, as I'm hearing y'all talk, you remember the transition between like before you had kids and then after you had kids, and you like, everybody's like, oh, smiling, like, I remember. But before we had children, there were ways that we just kind of like did things, and we didn't really think about them. We went out, we ate when we wanted to eat, we went to the grocery store when we wanted to go to the grocery store. Like there were all these things that we didn't have to think about. And then when we had kids, we had to be more intentional about it. You had to plan it out. Like I was going to do this. And so one of the things that the pandemic is kind of uncovering for all of us, a lot of people have compared the pandemic, not only COVID, but the racial violence that we've kind of been through and seen in our country recently. They've compared it to pandemics, and they say it just kind of like swept everything up and left the bedrock where we can just see all of the things that were kind of wrong. And so one of the things that all of us are experiencing right now is the way in which routines were a substitute for like intention. We were just doing stuff, but we didn't actually like have an intention. We're like, the reason why I'm going here is because this is the way I take care of myself, or the reason why my child does this is because I really have this plan for, this is the way I want them to act, or this is the way I want them to think, and that kind of stuff. And so I just want to say that we're all in that same boat of realizing, kind of looking at it saying, oh my goodness, like I actually didn't have a plan for self-care before. I just took that commute time in my car and I just made that self-care. But I didn't really think about it. And so now we're having to be intentional about that. And that's something we can talk about. But the reason why I bring that up is not only because that's something all of us are kind of going through right now, but it's also what our children are going through. They had the routine of school, and that was masking perhaps study habits. They had the routine of school, and that was masking some of the social skills in terms of like getting in touch with people and communicating and stuff like that. And as families and as parents, we're learning that those are things that we're going to need to teach our children. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, so when we think about learning loss, it's all the things that we said in terms of missing in-person schooling opportunities. I just want to point out that all of the research, in addition to the conversations that we're all having, all of the research about learning loss is really centered on assessments that kids took while they were at home. So there was a lot of kids and a lot of data that's not included in that. Additionally, it's for within K-8, they're seeing that K-8 math achievement is suffering worse than literacy achievement. So that's kind of like the big kind of takeaways from like learning loss as an idea. One of the things when we think about learning loss, since we've talked about, our children, is we want to start with our children first. And this article just came out, and it was talking about this teacher in Boston who asked her 8th grade students, a lot of adults are freaking out about learning loss. Like, what do you want to tell them? And so I'm going to read it for like the people who aren't looking at the screen and for the people who will be tuning in later. But one child said, my grades are better now. Stop trying to change things just because you're uncomfortable. Thank you. 8th grade. I want to tell them, I want them to know that some kids may be struggling, but some are having less of a problem with remote learning than others because every person has a different experience with things. Another child said, they have many opinions, but they're not the ones who wake up and get on Zoom every day. And then another child said, I feel like I didn't want to do school anymore. And because of the pandemic, I had to think to myself, that's not the path that I want to go down. So I started changing and completing my work and focusing on myself instead of people. And so we have both our kind of experiences with the idea of learning loss. We have like this definition of learning loss, which is this idea that students are not going to be on grade level, or that students are performing below projections compared to where they performed last year. And then we have students kind of experiences with learning loss. Some are saying like, we're fine, this is cool, you know, not fine because we're in a pandemic, but academically we're fine. And some are saying like, you really can't tell, you know, because everybody has a different experience. And so where does that leave us, right? And so as I was thinking about it, I was thinking about learning loss and just the power of the words. I don't know who came up with that term. It reminded me of, you know, like lessons that I used to teach in 4th grade when I was like Boston Massacre or Boston Revolt, like just how historians and how people use language to make people feel, you know, certain ways. And so when I was thinking about learning loss, I broke it apart and I started with the loss part, because when you actually think about like what we're focused on, that determines our response to it. So our response to loss is mourning and grieving, right? And so when we're thinking about learning loss, when we're thinking about loss in general, one thing that we need to do is talk about our loss. And we need to have rituals and routines and processes for this grief that we're all experiencing. And this might be an awesome time for you to connect to like your school's guidance counselor and school psychologist for suggestions for how to do that. And the reason why I bring this up is not only to just piece apart like this idea of learning loss, but this ability to talk about what you've lost, to talk about grief, to share this together as a family is necessary for our students in order for them to learn. So you're in a different headspace when you're not dealing with your grief. You have like your brain is not functioning the way that it normally would when there's unresolved issues going on. And so having a space, having a routine, having some time just to sit with your children and think about like, what are the things that we're grieving right now? What are the things that we lost? What are the things that we miss? It might seem like a downer. It might seem like, oh, I don't want to do that. That doesn't seem like a great way to kick off my day, but it's really necessary, because instead of that grief kind of showing up, you know, in the middle of a class, or showing up at the end of the day, or showing up in a way that a child doesn't even want to be engaged at all in any of their lessons, they know they have a safe space to talk about it. And so that's kind of the first kind of idea for like responding to this idea of loss. The second one is like responding to this idea of learning, and our response to learning should be engagement, right? And so I'm just super excited about this part, because we have so many reasons for hope. We have so many reasons to be encouraged. Data shows that at-home learning can be effective, because when it comes to learning things, it's really about the quality of engagement and the time, the quality of engaged learning time, as opposed to just time in general in the academic content. And so I think y'all have probably already seen that, you know, at your homes. If you're working with your child on something, I've been working with my oldest on something, and even as a teacher, I'm like, wow, a 60-minute lesson is what I usually would teach this in, but we did this in 15. Things are very different when you're one-on-one, or when you're doing it in small pieces throughout the day, or when you're even in a small group, because I have children that are very close in age. And so we have to sometimes do things in small groups. And so you can be encouraged that like your child as a learner, even though they're missing the hour of math that they had in class, that hour of math doesn't equal an hour of math at home. That hour of math in class might equal 15 minutes in class. I mean, at home. Now, some of the social emotional and like social things that happen in a class, like talking to peers, resolving conflict, those kind of things, that's some of the things that we might be missing in at-home learning. But if we're really specific about the things that happen that make maybe a math class at school 60 minutes, as opposed to like what our child can actually learn in like 15, 20 at home, then we're like, oh, I'm noticing that like some of the social things that they did at school, like conflict resolution and group, I need to try to find a way to maybe simulate that at home. Okay. But it's not about the time. It's really about engagement and engaged learning. Which is way more efficient when you only have one child or two children or three children. The second thing that we can be really excited about and encouraged by is that we need to focus on our child as a learner, and we can take heart in the science of how people learn. So when we see data that says that students are regressing or they're not doing anything, one thing that we know is that all academic skill will decay over time if it's not used on a daily basis. And this is particularly true when it comes to procedural skills. It's one of the reasons why my husband gets so upset because I keep resetting our Amazon password because I keep forgetting it because I'm trying not to use it as much. And so every time I go in, I'm like, oh, what was that password? I know everybody's like, just write it down. But it just makes more sense to me just to keep, making up a new password every single time. Similarly, in school, there are going to be some things that students practice over and over and over for a bit of time, or those of us who work in schools know that there's seasons in school where you're presenting new material, then you do a whole bunch of review, then you present and do a whole bunch of review. That's because students are losing it or they're not using it, so it's not just top of mind. But if they understood it when it was taught, it's not that it's lost, it's that we just need to practice it again to bring it back up to the forefront of our minds. The cool thing about at-home learning as opposed to school learning is that spaced practice is more effective than large blocks of content. And so large blocks of content is kind of what happens in school a lot of time, whereas spaced practice is something that we can do to complement what's going on at school. And I'm going to try to fast forward, but I want to give a quick example. Let's see if I can give a quick example. So, for example, I have a first grader, and she is learning sounds. She's doing a lot of phonics, right? And so y'all see this little hand on our very dirty refrigerator. This little hand says spoon, group, moose, and poof. And all of these words have to do with this ooh sound that Naomi can learn, right? Every time she wants to go into the refrigerator, which is a lot, to get something to eat, she could just like smack the hand and say spoon, group, moose, poof. And every single time, I mean, I don't know how many times she goes into the refrigerator. My husband's working downstairs. We don't have a separate space for him to have an office. And so he's working downstairs. He's not necessarily like attending to Naomi in that moment, but he can see when the refrigerator opens because he's constantly monitoring that. And he can hear her say the words or not say the words. And he knows what those words are. You switch those words up every couple of days. You put some of the words like that in the morning, some different words in the afternoon, that kind of thing. They're getting so much practice with those sounds and with that reading in a way that is very different. I don't want to say it's better, but it's just very different than how they can do it at school. And it's complementary and it's going to work and it's going to help them learn those skills. I was talking to some middle school teachers. The handprint and smacking it and saying it is like more of an elementary thing. But I told a parent, I said, there's no reason why you can't do a sheet of paper with like a dangly pen and just say like, what is 30% of 72? And have your middle schooler go ahead and write that down every time they try to get, or have different problems and have your middle schooler answer those problems as they go into the fridge and leave. It's a very passive way for you as a parent or a caregiver to be a part of the learning that they're doing at school, but in a way that uses space practice, which is ultimately a very efficient way to learn. So I feel like I've been talking a lot. Anybody got any kind of like reflections on, one, any kind of routines that they have with their kids and with their learners in order to kind of process this idea of grief, or two, some ways that you're kind of like sneaking in some very short practice sessions that allow you to still stay sane and do your work, but also help them.
I set boundaries for the girls. You know, when I when I have a live training session, which I have tomorrow, so I set boundaries around when I'm doing a live training that, you know, they need to be self-sufficient and not interrupt mommy, but they're really in session live more than I am. But the other thing is that I still keep routine, because typically at dinner time, even when they're in school, I check in and say, how was your day? And I still do that, even though I pretty much know how their day was, because I listen. That is
we're all here.
Yes, I listen, and I think that is helpful. I appreciate being able to hear how the teacher interacts with them, because it allows me to check in with her if I need to. So I try to continue with the routines. And that's helped quite a bit. Some days they look at me and like, really, how was my day? You know how my day was. But I still try to do that and keep them on task. And I do appreciate the example you gave with, and now they'll probably get sick of seeing multiplication problems all over the refrigerator and in the bathroom and everywhere. I'll be putting them all over the house, and they'll be helpful for me too. So thank you very much.
Oh, no problem. For my younger one, like, I mean, and it didn't have to be like written down. So that one, I just put a sheet of paper and put some contact paper over it, you know, just so I could like use a dry erase marker on there. But for like the little one, even for the baby boy, when we're walking out of the front door of the house, you can just say, "Ooh, before we go out, there's a password. There's a password." And so like the little one, he's 3, he's working on colors or something like that. So I could point to something on my shirt and be like, what color is this? And he's like, blue. I was like, you got the password, we can go, you know? And so I think one of the things that I hope this session does is not only inspire you and give you some ideas for there are some easy ways that you can do these things at home, but it's kind of like when you learn how to cook. I'm a recipe girl. Like I didn't know how to cook before I became an adult. Like I was still eating cereal like yesterday, but like for real, I was still eating cereal for a minute for dinner because I didn't have a plan for cooking. And then over the years, I started using recipes and I started to see trends, you know, like, oh, things usually have a little bit of salt, things usually have a little bit of this, usually a bit of that. And so now when I pull out some chicken, although I was kind of blanking on what to do tonight, I know I can use panko. I know I can use a couple of things and I just have it in my repertoire. It just comes easily to me. And that's what's going to happen for you guys too. As you start playing around with some of these things, you're going to start cooking. You'll be like, oh, this is a great time for you to like have all these fractions in this recipe because you're working on fractions. Thank you. You know, this is going to be when your kid is asking for something, you're like, oh my gosh, that you want. Which price is greater than the other? Which price is less than the other? Like you're just going to have all of these ideas for very easy ways that you can practice skills with your learners at home. And so the last kind of thing that I want to say is like, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what do you suggest for older children that aren't into like high schoolers that aren't like, they might push back on like, I'm not answering no question before I get food. You know, like I guess in conversation is something that's more like passive, like building vocabulary, I think is important and something that like, they don't do a lot. And like a thesaurus, like kids just Google everything. So And like even spelling, like you don't even really have to know how to spell because you have spell check and you can Google and look it up. So like how
Yeah.
do you like do those types of things with them, you know, as high schoolers, as older children?
Yeah. Um, thanks for talking about that. I think the first thing to think about in terms of high schoolers is just like developmentally what's going on with them, right? So we know in adolescence, the focus kind of shifts from more adult centered to more peer centered. And so they really care about what their friends say, they really care about what their friends think, etc. Right? Similarly, their ability to self-regulate, their ability to kind of like lead their own learning in a lot of ways, um, is ripe. Like they're ready to go. And so for some of the things that are for some of the things for high schoolers in passing, I think it's helpful to kind of ground yourselves. I put it on the screen, but it's helpful to kind of think about the soft skills that high schoolers need. University of Chicago calls these non-cognitive factors, so things that don't have to do with thinking, but non-cognitive factors, soft skills, etc. They kind of are all synonymous. They break them into like academic behaviors, like going to class, homework, organizing, materials, participating, studying. Then they have perseverance, which is like delayed gratification, self-control, tenacity, mindsets. What is their mindset? Sense of belonging. How do they believe that when they put in a lot of effort with something, they're going to succeed? Learning strategies. There's a bunch of learning strategies like study skills, metacognitive strategies that has to do with like, do they know how they learn? Do they know how they're thinking? Do they know what's going on in their head at a moment? Are they aware of it? Goal setting, and social skills like emotional intelligence, problem solving, decision making, empathy, cooperation, etc. So if I'm talking to a high schooler, if a high schooler is in my house and we're just going about our day, one of the things that I'm thinking about, and y'all probably saw it over the summer, a lot of parents were putting together a list of like adulting. They're like, these are the things you need to do in order to be an adult, right? I would think just like observe your child really thoroughly for a day or so, 2 days, over the time, and kind of see like, what are you noticing that they're doing really well? And what are you noticing that you wish they would do more and you think is important for them in order to be an adult? And then those are the things that you come back to in those conversations. And so like, if you notice that like decision making is not really a thing, you don't think your child has like a strategy for decision making, like a pro con, you know, and then weighing it out, or you think that in decision making you need to make sure that they know how to do pros and cons, to consult like trusted advisors, and you want to be kind of really clear like, who are their trusted advisors, like who would they go to besides like their friends, their age mates. Those are some of the things that I would bring out in conversation. You can bring those things out in conversation if you're talking about current events. You can bring those things out in conversation if you're talking about the things that they're reading and learning about in school. But for you, it's just really easy for you to think about like the one or two things that you think your child needs in order to just be a young adult, and then use that to kind of filter your conversations with them. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I sure do have a few chores they could pick up and take from me.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, well, I'm gonna put this right here. So this is my strategy. This is a physical version of a Kanban board, and a lot of businesses use this in like lean management. I'm looking at the chat. And so what this is a to-do, doing, and done thing. And so at the beginning of the week, we've been using this all year. The beginning of the week, we kind of like put all the different things that they could be learning about, and then at the beginning of the day, we set some kind of intention, like, what are you going to be doing today? Like, what are you going to do first? What are you going to do second? What are you going to do third, etc. Right? And then as they do it, they kind of go over, these are Post-its that I cut. As they do it, they go over and they move it. And it's like, to do, I'm doing this now. Or these are things I have to do. Doing, I put it there just to let you know I'm doing it. And what's really cool is that just like us, I don't necessarily finish something all the way through when I first start. I might start reading, then I'm like, that's enough of that. And then I might work on something else, and then I might come back to reading. And so that's why you have multiple things in the doing category, right? And then when they're done, they're done. And the reason why I like this is if I was thinking about the kind of learner that I want my girls to know that they have control over their time. I want them to know how to kind of set aside what needs to happen. I want them to know that it's not just about the things that they want to do, it's about the things that need to get done, which is why y'all see cleanup on the list. But then there's also like a TV break on there too, right? I want them to know and be able to like decide, I'm doing something, I'm tired of doing something, I'm going to do something else, but I still know I need to get back to that, right? And we don't do every single thing, we don't do like every single thing every single day. And so we might only do 6 things one day, we might only do 3 things one day, it just depends. But this is an organization technique that that we use. And in high school, you could very much like have a shared a text, it's like, these are the things that need to happen in the day, text me when y'all get them done, or like, ping me when you get them done. Some high school parents also said that they use Google calendars, and they do shared calendars with their children. And so they, at the beginning of the day decide like, what time should I expect the bathroom to be clean? Cool. And so then they'll put like a little notification on the calendar, like bathroom should be clean by blank time, So that's just some ideas for how to take this structure for, helping your child learn how to do like self-manage, honestly, and developing their soft skills, and how that can be applied to younger learners as well as older learners.
Thank you.
No problem. This is awesome. Y'all keep it coming. I think ones that you kind of reminded me of is this is where we start, right? You do need to start. And somebody said that you start with the expectations, like I have a call and that kind of stuff. When we think about learning loss, and we think about, like just at this time that we're in, it's just really important for us to frame it according to what's important to us, And so when I think about learning loss, I first need to be clear, like the type of learner that I'm going for, like what are the characteristics of the learner that I want my child to be? What are the characteristics of the learner that they want to be? Are we all on the same page? Once we have that vision, then when we think about loss, it's like, to what extent is our experience right now not helping them become that learner, or to what extent is right now helping them become that learner? That's kind of my orientation, right? And so this is something that we did at the beginning of the year. This is also a practice that a lot of teachers do in their classrooms. And this is square one. It's the vision. It's the vision for the type of learners you want to be. It's the vision for what you want at-home learning to look like. And so I just use a look like, feel like, sound like, in B chart for high schoolers. This is a conversation that needs to happen. You didn't have to be written down on a chart or anything like that, but like, what do we want this time to feel like? What do we want this time to look like? What do we want it to sound like? So that everybody's on the same page about expectations, and so that everybody's on the same page about, if we do this like this at home, what can we expect to happen? And that's just a lifelong skill. And so this is what we did. And I just said, it looks like we're doing stuff together and by ourselves. And so when my, 4-year-old is like, hey, Mom, I really want you to help me. I'm like, oh, we said that learning looks like together and by ourselves. This is a by ourselves time, that kind of stuff. We said that we wanted to, sound quiet when Josh is taking a nap, or quiet when somebody's on a call and you have to self-manage. We said we want to feel stressful. I mean, not stressful. I just saw stressful in there. We want to feel not stressful and chill and relaxed. And we want to feel not boring. And when they said not boring, I was like, wait a second. And we had a whole conversation about whose responsibility is it for our day not to be boring? Is it my responsibility? Is it theirs? Is it something that we share? And so getting aligned on expectations, getting aligned on what you want at-home learning to look like, and what everybody's expectations are, is literally square one for everybody. And this is what happens. Sometimes it be like this. So this is when Lydia made a bad choice and she decided to cut her pants. She couldn't cut them all the way up because she hit that band at the bottom. You know, we have a routine where we kind of check in at the end of the day, and it's like, so did our day go like we said we wanted it to go? You know, and like she said no, and it's like, huh, what happened? You know, she's like, well, I didn't do this, and I was like, so what do you think you want to do next time? You know, she's like, not that. It's like, cool, and then that was it. But the stress of having to try to like manage her or manage my children is much less now because I'm not doing it to them. This is expectations that we all set. This is shared vision that we all have. And so this is not something I'm doing to them. This is something I'm doing with them. And my role in doing it with them is to just really ask questions. This wasn't dangerous. I'm sad that these pants were ripped up, but like, this wasn't dangerous. And so my role as the adult learner is to just kind of say, and help her think better about it. And she hasn't done it since. So I think it's working. Yeah, you have a question?
Yes, I do, because I think it's so important. I agree with you, the conversation about expectations, and but I also feel that during this pandemic, like there were so many days that I just had to really drop it. And so we have, I mean, I always tell my son, like, you need to do all your homework. Like, you know, you look at Google Classroom and you see what's due today. And they literally, his teachers like put every day a post, like what is due today. So he knows what he has to do today. But I think this week, for example, like his school was closed again. It was a snow day. Even the one sport activity that he had was closed. You know, everybody was inside his apartment for a very long time. And he was just so down. I just told him, you know what, like, choose which homework you want to do and do a really good job. And I just think that like there's so many times during this pandemic that I just had to really lower my expectations dramatically about what my kids could do. And so I would love to hear your thoughts about that, because it's hard. You feel like, am I being too, you know, soft, or it's just really hard to find the right balance?
I don't even think the conversation is like, is that right or wrong? Honestly, I think it's like, what's your vision and what do you want? And so as a mom, there's sometimes that we just want to protect and kind of like give them a break. You know, it's like, I want to give you a treat, you know, and like for an older kid, a treat isn't a cookie anymore. It's like, you ain't got to do those 2 assignments. Like, thank you, you know. But then on the other side of it, I want my child also to be able to say that for themselves, you know, in the same way that as an adult, like you look at an assignment, you're like, I'm not gonna be able to do this. Like, I just can't today. You know, we want to raise learners that say the same thing. And so I think it's just a balance of like, when do you want to give him a break? And when do you want him to feel like he can cut himself a break? And he can advocate for himself and say, Mama, this week has been crazy. These are the 5 assignments that I have to do. I was thinking that I'm only gonna do these 3. What do you think? You know? And it's like, oh, okay, yeah. And I was thinking the other day, I told Nate to do something and she took some paper and I was like, whoa, what are you doing with the printer? What are you doing with that paper, my girl? And she said, you said we were going to go outside, but we didn't get a chance to. And I want to do something active. So I was going to make myself an indoor hopscotch. Is that okay? And I was like, I guess, you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess, but like, that's the kind of learner that's the kind of individual that I'm grooming her, I guess, to be. And so if it's in line with like your vision of who you see your child as and their vision of who they're trying to become, then I think that's great. I think that's great. I know we only got a little bit of time, so let me get to some of this nitty gritty content stuff. This is one of the things Ashara was like, what? People have these things? So once you are, you know, kind of like have your vision of like what you want, a part of your vision might be like, I want my baby to be good at math. I want them to not fail. And that might be their vision too. They're like, I want to be good at math, or I want to, you know, do really well on XYZ. And so the first step for us after we talk to our learners and, you know, have that vision is to get really clear on what needs to be learned. And so there's documents like this, and this is from Achieve the Core, and it's called a focus document. And I'm talking about math since they said that learning loss was projected to be to be greater in math than it was in ELA. And I just picked third grade, but they have pages like this for every single grade, right? For younger learners, I think like obviously we would own kind of knowing some of this. For older learners, I think it'd be fascinating to give this to them and say, like, what does this tell you about what's going to happen for you this year? What are you good at? What do you need some help on? A lot of times as parents, when we get information like on grade level, off grade level, proficient, not proficient. But math, even when it's reported as proficient or not proficient, is actually composed of a bunch of different areas. And those different areas are actually what teachers use to drill down to help learners learn more. And so during a specific school year in math, I'm going to learn about measurement, but I'm also going to learn about multiplication. Those are two different kind of topics, two different clusters. And so even if my child is proficient at grade level math, if they're terrible at measurement, that's something as a parent that I want to know about. Because even if it's not a big issue now, it's a part of their math foundation and it might come up later. And so the way that you kind of read this is all the green areas are major clusters, and that's where teachers are going to be spending, 75% of their time, 60 to 75% of their time. Additional clusters are things that they're going to spend like 5 to 10% of their time. And supporting clusters are ways that you can talk about content that goes along with the major ones. For example, when we're talking about interpreting data, I can multiply and divide by 10, or I can solve problems with multiplication through looking at data. If I say this, the COVID rate in New York was so many people per day. How many people per day are projected to be infected by in 10 days? Like I'm using data, but I'm also using multiplication and division. And so that's the way that teachers take information or clusters of skills and put them along with like big ideas for the grade level. The reason why this matters for you is because when you're thinking about what like things that you can do at home, those small things that you can do at home, this required fluencies, what's really important for third grade that they just be fluent with is adding and subtracting within 1,000. So those are some things that is really easy. Like, what do I even need to work on? If I have some time, what do I need to be working on? When you were talking about earlier, I think, Natasha, when you're saying like, I'm just Googling everything, like this will help you kind of prioritize what you really want to spend your time on so that you don't have to be bopping around from like place to place to place. So that's one thing. The second thing is,
does this exist for high school?
Yes, they have it for high school. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
They got it for high school. The second thing is like, to the extent that you can, see if you can actually get the assessment results as opposed to just the score. Okay. Like, for example, like this is my daughter's like spelling material at the beginning of the year. And she like took a spelling test to figure out like what level she was on for EL Education's curriculum. It's one thing to be like, oh, she's exactly where she needed to be at the beginning of the year, which she was, it's a whole nother thing to be like, Naomi doesn't know digraphs. She doesn't know when you put two sounds together. Or Naomi confuses short I sounds with short A sounds. Because if I actually had the test and somebody walked me through the test, then I know that the little hand that I'm putting on the refrigerator has short A sounds and short I sounds. And so the practice that she's doing every 3 hours at home is actually going to move her closer to her goal of getting better at whatever spelling thing that she's working on, without me actually even doing a whole bunch of work. So the more specific that you can get with exactly the skills that need to be focused on, the better. It's less stressful for you. It's motivating for them because they're like, that's what I'm working on. It's like, yeah, that's it. Cool, let's do it. And it allows you to focus. And Ashara, this is for you. For those of us who have pre-K kids and that kind of stuff, one of the things that needs to happen before students learn how to read is they really build their phonological awareness. And what that means is they need to know like the awareness of sounds. This has nothing to do with what's being written. This is all oral. This is all what you're talking about. And what your kids need to be able to do is play with sounds. And so these are the 9 skills that all readers need to kind of have as a great foundation for learning how to read. You don't have to go in order, but it's really good to know. And so I put this, you know, kind of this list of skills kind of up here for you, because in addition to going and asking your educators for resources, kind of like the one with engage, not for the focus document. So in addition to asking for things like the focus documents, and in addition to asking for things like the actual test, so you can see like trends and patterns in answers, anytime you can get a list of skills ahead of time, it's going to be way less stressful for you doing things at home. Because if you get told on Monday that your kid needs to know these 3 things for the week, then that's just another thing on your list of things to do. And it's a lot, right? But if you get told in January that these are the things that we're working on for January and February, that's great, because now you can be a lot more flexible. You have time to ask questions. You can pick and choose what you need to do, and that feels better for you. And when you're less stressed, then you're more able to help your learner at home. And so making rhymes is a thing. I thought my kid knew how to do it. She didn't. It's like, good to know. She can say rhymes all the time, but if I say, I have the word that, give me a word that rhymes with that, she couldn't tell me. She couldn't tell me at the beginning of the year. When I did this, she could do it now, right? What's the first sound that you hear in the word cup? What's the last sound you hear in the word cup? You know, and then that goes on to, if I have the word cup and I change that k sound and I added a p sound, what would I have? And they say pup, and it's like, oh, great job. So here's some things, and that could be your password. You know, they're about to go to bed and you're about to go into the bedroom like, tell me a word that rhymes with dog. They're like, fog. You can go to sleep tonight. I'm just kidding. You can go in. So you can use those kind of interchangeably as you know the different skills that they need to work on. And the last thing I'll kind of say about content, because I know we're at time pretty much, is whenever you can, ask for resources that show you kind of like, what will it look like if you're learning? And what do you kind of notice about these questions related to fractions that's surprising or different from how maybe you learned fractions?
I mean, I learned in Brazil when we just had to memorize the timetables. That's basically it.
Yeah. Like, so none of this, like we'd have to do any of it. Yeah.
No.
One of the things that I think is interesting is I never had to put fractions on a number line. I did all of the circle ones, but I didn't do fractions on a number line, right? So that's helpful for you as a parent, because when you see fractions as something they need to work on, you're like, I got this. And then you're like, oh, you look at this, you're like, oh, I know fractions, but I never thought about it in this way. So either number one, I'm going to really collaborate and lean heavily on the teacher to teach them that way. And I'm going to go with the way that I know, or I'm going to take what I don't know, which is putting it on a number line, and see how that fits with what I do know, which is like these pizza squares. And that way I'm helping myself be more equipped to help my child learn. So those are the 3 things there. I mean, I feel like we could keep going, but I feel like even when I posed that question, I realized I haven't been talking for a long time. And so we can take the last couple of minutes, or literally a minute, if anybody has anything else that they want to like throw out for the good of the group, or any reflections or thoughts.
Do you want to share the website where Parents can look up
Yep.
the grade level specifics and skills.
Yep. I already got it up. So this is Achieve the Core. And it's just achievethecore.org. I can put it in the chat too. Yep. And this is focus areas. We didn't talk about ELA because in general, ELA is ELA, I mean, the way you get better at reading is to read. The way you become better at reading comprehension is to comprehend really good literature. You know, the only thing I'll say about that in like 30 seconds is the words that you come across when you're reading. The reason why everybody says just read, read, read is because the words that we use in our regular conversation don't come anywhere near the words that you come across when you read a text. We're really limited in the words that we just use in our general vocabulary. And to prove this, like I listened to Secret Garden on Spotify with my kids for 3 minutes. And in 3 minutes, there were like 15 vocabulary words. I was like, what? Words that I knew, but they just don't come up in everyday conversation. And so if you have an older learner or a reluctant learner, Spotify or Audible or anything like that, where you just put it on and listen to it 5 minutes a day and then talk about it, that'll give you something to talk about. And it's invaluable. And it's a way, and we can't even, duplicate it when we just have conversations and chat amongst ourselves. So, and that is, yeah. And that's it.
Any reflections or questions before we get into the wrap up part of the meeting? I don't know about you guys, but Gretchen is like a lifeline, and she's gonna be the reason why we get through kindergarten. So I'm already giving her roses and thanking her in advance. And I hope you guys connect with her. If you want to drop your information below in the chat for folks to share that out. And I know that since it was a small group, we're going to end up pushing out this direct recording, so you can pass this along to your parent groups and just folks that you think it would be valuable information to share it with. So for tonight's and this month's action steps, you'll receive an email. But like we've mentioned before, we have a Twitter training, a council-wide Twitter training, because we have a brand new Twitter account. If you're on Twitter, if you feel like you think you want to get on Twitter, you can join us during that training, learn how to use Twitter to its fullest abilities, and then also just follow us on Twitter as well. And then we are now in the web game, because we have our website up and running. Very exciting, because I've been talking about it for months now. So I'm going to drop it in the chat, but we have our live website is out there. So check it out, give us feedback, and obviously share that out. And then the last part of the month's action steps. So like we mentioned before, we had Deborah Garrett, Maria Cruz, who were on the EduPeers podcast. We've had Edwin and Jason, who were recently on Raymond's podcast. We've had Maria and Sabrina attend a legislative session to testify. With that being said, there are a number of opportunities for more parents to get their voices out there, to really share out their experiences with New York State. If you feel like you would like to take an attempt, an approach at it, or you want to talk more about what that would look like, please give me an email or message us on Facebook, because we're actively looking for opportunities to continue to lift up parent voice. And then next month's meeting is going to be March 3rd. You'll receive an invite for that. 6 p.m. As always, we're going to discuss all things special education. So classroom supports, as well as what you can do to support yourself at home. Other than that, I thank everyone for joining us tonight. And I hope you stay safe and stay warm, and we'll see you next month.
Hey guys.
Thanks, Gretchen. Thank you
So
so
welcome.
much.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, guys.
All right, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.